Welcome back again. This is now the fourth video about research and part of our larger Marketing Basics video series. So when we last left off, we were talking about doing a situation analysis about the company, that followed up by a situation analysis of the competitors, and that would also include understanding the marketing environment, those uncontrollable variables that impact our business. So now we're on to the third area, which is doing a situation analysis of consumers. Consumer behavior is basically applied psychology. When we understand how consumers think and feel, well, that knowledge is very helpful in trying to make sure that we're creating the right product for them, we're getting the product to them in a way that works, and for us in particular in this program, really knowing how to appropriately create marketing communications that connect with them, that resonate. So let's talk a little bit more about consumer behavior. I think a lot of times students want to jump right in and like, hey, let's do a survey. Let's go ask people their opinions. You know, we're used to thinking like this because as consumers, we have filled out response cards. We have done surveys online. We've been intercepted in a mall and asked questions. And so we often think, hey, just collect that data. But there's actually a great amount of already existing information, secondary research that already exists that you should be utilizing our library or going on the internet and digging around and trying to find some of that. I think a better way to approach this first is think about what information do I actually need to understand to help articulate what I'm going to be doing with my campaign. I would start off thinking just very broadly, like, what do consumers think about the industry that your company is competing in? What do they think about your particular product or your service? What do they think about your brand? What do they think about other companies that compete in that same space with you? A lot of this sounds like it might be repetitive, what we just talked about in the last video about competitor analysis, but this is specifically how do consumers see it. You might be able to do some objective research and understand what is true about you and your competitors. This is more about what do people think and feel, which sometimes is, because of great marketing, not necessarily rooted in actual truths. But it's good that you know what people do think about you and your competitors. I think it's very important to understand what differences they think exist between you and other people in your industry. You might be very aware because, of the company that you work for, what you're really strong at, what you're weak at, what are the opportunities and challenges. Does that mean that the consumers are aware of those differences? There could be some very meaningful things going on that are different between you and the competitors, but consumers don't know that. That gets into the idea of thinking about positioning. We talked about branding in the previous two videos, but I think it's really important to understand how does that branding actually work on consumers? Do they buy into an idea about your brand? Or is that all hopeful, wishful thinking on your part, what you want them to believe? You really need to understand where they're at. I think it's very important to understand what do consumers want versus what they need. Needs are pretty important because, we got to eat. You got to have a roof over your head. But wants actually are often sometimes requiring more marketing communications, because if it's not something that you absolutely need, but it's kind of an emotional response and they desire something, well, a reassuring message can often push them to the store and get them to purchase your product. It's good to kind of understand some of that information, and there's a lot of different things that you can do to articulate what are people's desires and how does your brand connect with those. I think it's good to understand how do people talk about your product. I think it reveals a lot about their feelings and the way they think about it. The language will reflect a positive or negative bias. So it's good to do that. And it's a good time to consider using social listening as a tool to identify specific examples of words people use. That could be helpful in crafting creative messaging for your marketing. And you'll learn more about that in some of your future classes in our program. And I just think it's good, just besides doing the research, to just spend some time brainstorming. How can you think about what you've learned in the research of consumer behavior? How can that open up some ideas that you really want to dive deeper in with a campaign? Did you notice some patterns of behavior that seem like they could create an opportunity to get people to know more about your brand and what your product is and why it's relevant for them? Think about that because it goes back to that idea that we talked about at the very beginning of our research videos. Everything should be leading to insights. When we know what we're doing, we are getting ready to take action. And I think that's really important because the next step in our process is translating research into action. Here's an example of a segment, it's a very broad one, says women in the workforce. But this kind of research can be really helpful when we think about, who are audiences that we target. Understanding some basic information maybe doesn't tell us everything we need to know about doing a campaign, but it might open up the door to say, hey, it's more than just a chart here. This led me to think there's an unexplored possibility. And that's really what we're looking to do with the next step. We want to get to insights so you have somewhere to go. Well, we'll talk about more of that in the next video. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. Thanks for joining me. I'll see you in the next video.